It's been going on for about 3 weeks in our dorm and our hall. My roommate and I started to smell a little something every time we'd walk in. It would smell kind of musty and old, like something was wrong. And we had them come check our AC unit, and he just wiped some stuff down. That's all he did. And the next day we looked under our desk and under the drawers of our dresser, and they both had mold all over them. And eventually they changed all the furniture out, but there's still a problem with the AC and with every AC unit in this entire hall. So just cleaning it once and changing furniture hasn't really done anything so far. About 5 days after we've been here, I got a really bad cold. My nose was running all over the place. I was coughing. And then when I would be out of the room, the coughing would be few and far between, but every time I'd walk in the room, we would have coughing fits all night long. It would be waking up in the middle of the night to cough. It would be hard to breathe in here, so.
A lot of people left as fast as they could as soon as they heard the news. I left a night early to go back home since I'm local, but no one was really happy given like the timing of the situation with midterms and sort of, I guess, not being given enough warning. I would say that there should be more preventative measures done. The dorms, it's not like they're not being used over the summer entirely. They're used for orientation as well. Since it's so humid in the summer as well, they should probably go and check the rooms to see if there's anything growing or how they can prevent it from growing during the academic year.
I definitely think that they could have addressed it earlier as soon as they've known, because it just started out with them getting a couple reports, but then it ended up being the entire building having mold. So I think they definitely could have, and once they knew everyone had mold, they could have done it just a little bit earlier and kind of told us what was going on. I'm comfortable here. We have to uplift everything for an entire weekend, 5 days almost, and have to come back. So definitely there should be either compensation towards your housing, some money taken off, just to alleviate kind of our parents' worries as well as ours. I think there should be something else done besides just cleaning the mold.
Well, a 6-week trial has come to an end after a jury announced the verdict in a mold case against Seattle Children's Hospital.
So our Seattle station has been investigating this case since mold in the hospital's ventilation system began infecting several patients and even killing 7.
There are 2 major questions in this case. The first is whether fault lies with the doctors at Seattle Children's Hospital, and the second is whether there was negligence as a result of the mold. Attorneys representing the family tell me they are disappointed. In a downtown Seattle courtroom,
We, the jury, answer the questions submitted by the court as follows.
King County Judge Jim Rogers read the long-awaited verdict handed down by 12 jurors.
Question 1.
Did the University of Washington pediatric neurosurgeons or pediatric radiologists breach the standard of care when operating on a 2-year-old boy in 2019? In court documents, the toddler goes by HK.
Answer, no.
The jury found that Seattle Children's Hospital's negligence did cause injury and damages as a result of mold. The jury awarded HK, his mother, and father each $250,000, totaling $750,000. Far different from the $40 to $53 million plaintiffs asked for in damages.
I think you can argue that the loss of 1/3 of your skull is worth more than $250,000. On the other hand, we're willing to abide by the jury's numbers for each of the 3 of them.
The surgical team removed a flap of skull bone from the boy's head to access his brain. After the procedure, the skull bone tested positive for aspergillus, a mold that has been a problem in the hospital's operating rooms. 7 patients have died from hospital-acquired mold infections at Seattle Children's since 2001, and more than a dozen others have been injured. There are more lawsuits, and while some have been settled, this is the first to go to trial. Attorney Ed Moore, who represents the families, says this verdict could impact how other claims are viewed.
The fact that the jury awarded almost $1 million for these aspergillus damages proves that even in a case where the child does not become sick with it, that it's a serious injury.
Attorneys representing the family tell me it's possible they will appeal. Attorneys representing Seattle Children's Hospital declined to talk with me today. Here in Seattle, I'm Kristen Goodwillie, King 5 News.
25 investigates tonight with a warning about mold in public buildings across the state and what it means for your health.
Our team found mold complaints in courthouses, fire stations, libraries, even your kids' schools.
Anchor and investigative reporter Carrie Cavanaugh learned pandemic precautions may have led to a spike in these moldy matters.
25 Investigates got a tip about mold throughout a major public library. Through a series of public records requests, we found a much more widespread problem. Mold is an issue in buildings all across the state. Cleanup isn't cheap, and the pandemic may have made it worse. We also wanted to know how exposure to that mold could affect you.
Welcome to West Plymouth Fire Station number 2, one of the living quarters. You can see mold and...
Can you smell it?
Yeah, you can smell it.
Plymouth Fire Captain Brian Baragwana says after years with a leaky roof, the mold got so bad.
Right here in the... It's all just covered up.
It was no longer safe for firefighters and paramedics to sleep in here.
This spot right here is what actually finally got this building condemned.
That's when staff moved into a temporary trailer. Only here,
every exposed wall, you can see it's worse over here.
Even more mold.
I need my staff to be as healthy as they can, and these stations are working against me.
Fire Chief Ed Bradley says in the trailer they had to follow COVID safety protocols. That meant doors and windows were open during a humid and rainy summer.
So you're addressing one problem and potentially creating another.
We're trying to address one problem and keep crews healthy, and it created another problem, and now their building is not healthy.
This isn't just a problem here.
Libraries are especially susceptible because of all of the books and other things that mold loves to grow on.
At the Bridgewater State University Library, 25 Investigates found signs warning of moldy books in early October.
I think across the Commonwealth it's challenging.
Mark David Carmody is the university's Assistant Vice President of Operations. He says the challenge is combating humidity while following pandemic precautions.
One of the strategies is to bring in as much fresh air into the building as possible. That's hot, humid, fresh air that takes a little bit longer to condition. Those things combined create an opportunity for mold to grow.
And it did. Despite 6 large dehumidifiers running along with 3 air scrubbers, Carmody says the university needed to have some 300,000 books specially cleaned, losing dozens in the process. Bridgewater State says it spent $250,000 on mold mitigation at the library since July. Mold also grew in schools during the pandemic, but for a different reason. Those buildings were largely sealed up during remote learning. South Hadley High School in Western Mass delayed its September reopening to mitigate mold throughout. 25 Investigates reached out to 18 school districts across the state. Of the 13 districts that responded, 11 had mold issues over the last 2 years, particularly during this past summer, including Braintree, Framingham, Salem, Beverly. Duxbury schools had 16 mold complaints at 4 buildings over 13 months. Plymouth schools said it had 19 complaints of mold in 4 schools over just 3 months. And in courthouses from Malden to Concord to Newton to West Roxbury, the state has had to remediate mold issues. The Hampden County Courthouse in Springfield was temporarily shut down in August after numerous agencies lodged complaints there.
Mold itself, if we're breathing it in or inhaling it, it could go into our lungs and stimulate a reaction.
That's Dr. Shahzad Khan, a pulmonologist at UMass Medical in Worcester. He says mold could trigger a cough, congestion, wheezing, and asthma, and a person's reaction depends on length of exposure.
Usually like higher concentrations or for prolonged periods where there's bad ventilation.
Back in Plymouth, Chief Bradley said a recent survey of union members revealed more than 60% of them were dealing with some health effects of mold exposure.
Do you feel safe just coming to work?
I don't. I had to pay out of pocket for a CT exam of my lungs just to make sure that I was healthy.
Out in the street, they're dealing with enough hazards that shouldn't have to happen here in the building.
Say love. Love. It's love. It looks just like any other Sunday Mass for the members of the United Methodist Church. But they are not in their church right now. Mass is being held in the community center right now because of mold.
We got some of those little test kits that you get from the big box store and tested the air samples, and it turned out to be pretty bad.
Eddie Griffin says the mold was first spotted in January all over the church foundation, floor, and walls. He says it wasn't noticeable at first, but then he knew something was wrong when his wife kept having health problems.
Sunday she would feel fine, and then Monday she wouldn't feel so good. Come Tuesday, she just felt horrible, could hardly breathe, had earaches and things like that.
Pastor Brock Meyer continues to hold Mass for the people and sees this as an opportunity for the congregation to move beyond just the building.
The church is not the building, and there's something about this experience of being dislocated that has taught us that church is not about the building. So we're experiencing a spiritual renewal.
They are doing everything they can to raise enough money to help their church.
We've got a GoFundMe page going, and also churches are starting to call in with love offerings and support, and our community is really surrounding us.
So far, the congregation has raised $3,000, but they still need $27,000 in order to clean all of the mold out from their church.
There wasn't much to say for Pastor Eric Johnson. All he could do was watch and record as his church went up in flames.
Tears.
Never in a million years did he think he'd have to burn the place he worshiped. In 2008, Johnson received the church as a gift from the previous congregation, the Gospel Baptist Church.
They gave us everything.
Johnson poured in almost $50,000 worth of renovations.
From 2008 to 2012, everything went well.
The trouble began that same year in 2012. That's when a powdery substance was uncovered during the basement remodeling.
That powder contained toxic mold that we didn't know at the time.
Johnson says the mold started attacking his body within 24 hours of exposure.
Finding out my immune system is crashing, not knowing why.
He struggled with his health for an entire year.
I still have neurological problems, can't sleep without help, memory problems.
It came to a point where his doctor sent him away for further testing.
And he told my wife if he didn't get me to Florida within the next 6 months, I'd be dead.
It took him 3 months at a clinic in Clearwater, Florida to cleanse his body. Coming back to Asheboro, Johnson knew he could never step foot inside of his church again. The church held its last service there in 2013. It took 5 years to decide on what to do with the building. Johnson says it would have cost $100,000 to make the basement repairs, and no guarantee the work would have been successful.
So we could do all that and turn around and be right back in the same boat that we started.
He decided to let the fire department burn the church. He's hoping God can allow them to rebuild on the same land as the church, but in a different area.
He gave it to us. He's got a plan for the next thing as well.
Bad cough. I can't even hardly talk because I can't even breathe.
A Bridgeport senior says she's been sleeping in her car since Christmas due to what she describes as severe mold contamination in her apartment. Carmen Casado telling us the mold problem at Fireside Apartments on the Upper East Side is so bad she's ended up in the emergency room with health issues affecting her breathing. Casado showing us medical records backing up her claims. She says she's been sleeping in her car because she can't spend more than a few hours at a time inside the apartment without getting sick.
It was freezing outside. I had to sleep in my car because there was such mold, a lot of mold in my bed and everything. I couldn't sleep there. I had to go out and sleep in the car under the coat. It was below zero, right?
Her breathing, shortness of breath. I go with her to the hospital. We've been to the hospital twice. We've been to urgent care twice.
Councilwoman Maria Pereira says mold is a chronic problem in that complex and needs to be dealt with immediately. We are seeking comment from housing officials, and we'll let you know what they say when they respond.
It didn't improve. And
Dr. Ken Redcross, board-certified internal medicine and concierge doctor, joining me out of New York. Dr. Redcross, help me understand what mold like this to this extent can do to a child.
You know, Nancy, this is unfortunately a story that I hear so many times, especially in a lot of apartments and inner city areas where you have these landlords who don't know that there's mold. You know, lots of times you have children that come to the office and they'll have asthma, shortness of breath, wheezing, and all of these kind of phantom illnesses that just do not make sense. So this, unfortunately, is something that's extremely important, and I'm sure Brittany has seen
What
this
can
plenty
it
of
do
times
to a
as well.
child? That's my question. What can the potential outcome be? If
Yeah.
a child has asthma and they're sucking in mold every night, what does that do to them?
Well, it does several things. It can cause things such as pneumonitis, which is a horrible infection of the lungs. Sometimes it can also cause the infection that the mother mentioned, as well as in the sinuses. It can actually be deadly in some cases.
Sure.
A Roswell doctor is giving up his family practice to treat people who have been sickened by mold. He got the idea after seeing a dramatic increase in the number of patients suffering from mold infection, the majority of whom spent a lot of time in one building. News 13 Selena Westervelt is live in Roswell with more.
Kim, Goddard High School has had a problem with mold in the past. Now, Dr. Scott McMahon hopes that his new role will bring awareness to the mold infection and what to do about it.
Oh, it's one thing to be tired after you've been up all night. It's another thing to be tired all the time, and to feel lousy all the time.
Dr. Scott McMahon has been practicing medicine in Roswell for 18 years. About 2 years ago, he began to see an influx of patients who were suffering from fatigue, severe headaches, nausea, and what he describes as brain fog. The common link, most of them attended Goddard High School. These pictures taken by a parent 2 years ago are from the inside of Goddard High. The district responded to the issue, cleaning up the mold and routinely testing for it. We called the district today to see if it's still taking proactive approaches to prevent mold. Our calls have yet to be returned. Do you think there's a problem at Goddard?
I think it's what we would call a sick building.
But no one's home or business is immune to mold. Anyone who suspects they've been infected can be diagnosed with a simple blood test.
I have a 13-year-old, and he lives in Goddard District, so I have a year and a half to decide. And for me, I'm gonna check his genetic predisposition.
Dr. McMahon also hopes his new practice will treat those who are suffering and prevent future cases. Right now, he's treating a woman who's been sick for 10 years.
Her life is completely turned around. The headaches are almost gone. Her fatigue is almost gone. She has strength. She has ability to do everything.
Since 2009, Dr. McMahon has proven through lab tests that 34 of his patients have some form of mold sickness. Now, that's after attending Goddard High School. He is waiting on the results of 20 more tests. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Selena. Now, the best way to avoid mold in your home is to avoid significant moisture. Don't let water build up anywhere. Ventilate damp rooms and fix any water leaks quickly and any damage that they cause.
Now to these images, they may make your skin crawl. Rats and mold. A Pierce County mother said they are big problems at her complex, and she feels not enough is being done to address it. KARA 7's Michael Spears is live right now in Lakewood. And Michael, this mother said her kids have gotten sick.
She blames this mold, and years of online reviews show she's far from the only person who's reportedly dealt with the same problems here at the Pacific Walk townhomes. Now, tonight, the local health department says they've seen an increase countywide with issues like mold, and they're now doing something new about it. From the bottom to the top, Miranda Lopez said her walls are covered in mold.
We moved into this property in February of 2019, and the issues started rising in April.
Lopez shared cell phone video with us that she said was recorded inside her family's home at the Pacific Walk townhomes in Lakewood, and she said it's not their only problem.
I've caught at least 30 since moving in February.
Rats.
And I feel trapped in my own home.
She said management has offered Band-Aid fixes and tried to sweep the problems under the rug, and she said her family is suffering.
All 3 of my kids have gotten double ear infections and upper respiratory infections.
The Tacoma Pierce County Health Department said these are issues on their radar countywide.
We have noticed an uptick just in all sorts of housing issues.
An area the agency does not have regulatory power, but in what's described as a first, health officials are now connecting with people dealing with issues like mold for a series of upcoming community meetings.
And invite them to talk to us more to help us identify those solutions.
Miranda said her family's solutions are limited.
It's heartbreaking because there's nothing I can do to remedy the situation right away. I mean, we can't break a lease, we can't get up and move.
Tonight's reality check tomorrow marks 3 months since Hurricane Sally. Yet one Mobile woman says her apartment has yet to be repaired and mold is now growing in it.
NBC 15's Andrea Ramey spoke with her today. Andrea, taxpayers are paying for her to live in these conditions.
Yeah, Greg, that's because HUD pays for most of her rent. She says that rainwater is still flowing into her unit, mold is growing, and nothing's being done about it.
You see it. There go the mold.
From the outside, mold is visible on the windowsill. Pictures Ariante Terrell took inside her unit show water stains and mold on the ceiling.
I'm breathing in mold every day.
Hurricane Sally and Zeta dealt a 1-2 punch to Terrell's Cambridge West apartment complex on Ziegler Boulevard.
Hurricane Sally hit and my ceiling fell completely in. Then Zeta came through and just knocked the tarp everywhere.
Terrell says despite calls to management and to HUD, the storm damage has not been fixed, and she hasn't been offered another unit.
I've called a lot of numbers, and it's like no one, never called me back.
But NBC 15 did when she reached out to us for help. And we started making calls to find her some answers.
Hold on just a second, that you can talk to.
We were referred by the local office to the Millennia Housing Management's corporate office in Ohio.
The office staff are currently on the other line.
While we wait, so does Terrell.
I know we on HUD, and we might not look like we nobody, but I'm worried about my health. Around COVID, I shouldn't be living like this.
So we got an email from a viewer asking about mold in apartment buildings. The writer said he found green and black mold in his apartment and it's causing major respiratory issues for his wife. He said when he complained to his landlord and officials in his hometown of Arundel, he was told there are no laws to protect renters and no real recourse that he could take.
News Center's Jessica Gagne took a look into this. Jess, you found out the viewer's pretty much right.
Yeah, officials at the nonprofit Maine Indoor Air Quality Council say at this point there aren't many options for tenants when it comes to mold. It's actually easier for them to move than it is to fight the battle right now, but the group is hoping that will change soon.
Mold in rental units is an issue here for the state of Maine, and it's based on the hundreds of calls that we get.
Stories like this one from our viewer. He sent these photos and says mold is growing in his Arundel home and making his wife sick. Even with pictures like this, Christine Crocker of the Maine Indoor Air Quality Council says most likely the landlord is not legally bound to take action.
There aren't very strong laws to help them force the issue with the landlord. It can be an expensive fix. Lots of times there's a lot of misunderstanding that happens back and forth between the landlord and the tenant.
Crocker says mold is prevalent in Maine and is a challenge for landlords because every tenant reacts to it differently. Even very small amounts can make a sensitive person sick. She says some towns will take action against landlords when mold like this turns up, but if a code enforcement officer is not willing to take a look, there's not much the tenant can do. If you're suffering, Crocker says moving is the quick answer. Otherwise, you may end up waiting a while and spending a lot of money on lawyers before something is done.
It's just a challenge. If the landlord's not willing to fix the problem and the tenant doesn't have the resources to do it on their own, I don't know what recourse they really have.
That's something Maine Indoor Air Quality is hoping to change. Crocker believes mold management is the responsibility of both the landlord and the tenant. Her organization plans to hold a symposium where all involved parties can share ideas on the best ways forward, whether that be legislative measures or helping landlords with mold removal costs.
I don't know what the solution will be, but we're certainly looking, and I think there's a solution out there. I just don't know what it is yet.
Crocker says managing moisture is the key to managing mold, and we have resources listed for you on our websites. And of course, Amanda and Lee, this is a story we will continue to follow.
Lawmakers in South Carolina is working on recommendations when it comes to treating mold. They're looking at legislation in other states. Experts say the lack of clear evidence between the types of mold and specific illnesses makes it hard to regulate.
CDC's in the same boat. They have some suggestions. They've done some studies, but they've never come up with anything conclusive to say that this level of mold or this type of mold or mold in this situation is safe.
Only about a dozen states have legislation regulating the treatment and prevention of mold. There's no national standard for states when it comes to following this issue.